So now I'm going to go to our annual report. And really, the annual report is, how we in security will go in and kind of, I don't want to say brag on what we've done for the year, but it's really a time, when you have the executive's attention to create this annual report that says, here's all the great things we've done. Here's how the industry is moving. Here's, notable things. So I'll run through this. And this, I, typically like to present to the board at the beginning of the year. So they have it, documented of here's everything that was done in the last year. And a lot of our compliances that we're under actually require us to do annual reports to the board. So this is an example that I use, but you can change this, add to it. But I typically open this with a letter from the CISO, and this is here's how we're doing, how we view security within the company, and just kind of that opening executive statement. Then we'll dig into the report itself, right? And so with this report, I typically like to start this with the state of cybersecurity, right? As we look at different events throughout the year, we look at, big ransomware campaigns or the big companies that make the news. This is an area where we like to call out, this is what's going on in the industry, or specifically to the industry vertical that our clients are in. So if they're in finance or banking, we're going to call out what is the state of security within the banking industry or critical infrastructure or manufacturing, right? So that you're making this report personal to the client. This isn't a generic report. We want to tailor this so that they get that picture of how is security impacting them in their industry. Then we go into the real personal. So this is, we start with here's security in the industry and what vertical you're in, but then we'll go in and actually create a narrative of this is cybersecurity here, right? So this is how we're handling security within the business. And this is different, each client, each industry. But this gives you that place to, tell the board this is specific to you. This is how you're doing security. Then I typically like to come in and do a note of any audits or assessments for the year. So if we had penetration tests, compliance audits, tabletop exercises, what are the assessments? What were the big things? As we look at different regulated industries, we want to keep the board informed of, they were probably a part of these audits and assessments, but just to keep it, documented and summarize it. This is the assessments we had. This is any notable findings. Here's how we handled them. The team did a great job, closing out the remediations within a quarter. I mean, you call out, this is, so that they get that picture. So it keeps it, relevant, keeps it, at the front of mind that we're not doing security just to protect. We're doing security to also, be proactive so that, compliance, compliance is our minimum. We need to report, hey, we're doing our compliance, but, here's the results. And if you're doing great in audits and assessments, call that out in this report. The board wants to know that they've made the right decisions, that they're investing in the right places. Then I always like to put in a best practice alignment. So with this page, what I typically like to do is we have our mandatory, our compliance requirements. These are what we're required to do under contract or legislation, laws, those things. But a lot of times, security you can align with a universal standard. And so that can be NIST, ISO, CIS, kind of this universal, and it's more of a choice, that hey, we want to follow this framework. And so what I like to do is kind of put in a best practice alignment. So that way security, it removes everything that we're doing is an opinion and it actually opens it up to say, no, what we're doing is we're actually trying to align with best practices. And so when we report on that, we can, show, besides our compliance, here's also how we're doing against, the best practice, international best practices. Then I get a lot more detailed in this annual report, right? So the next thing we want to do is dive into how is the security and maturity and compliance, how is that program going, right? Did we see any roadblocks? Did we see any, notable things, like, we thought that the auditors were going to be doing this, but we've seen this shift to the auditors are now asking for this. So it's shifted how we need to do security or how we need to report. We're going to bring in the maturity. Like, we started this year doing this very ad hoc, but now we've got a very defined requirement, and we're trying to mature this process. So we want to call out, right? This is our chance to really brag on our teams, to really show how security has evolved. So if they get these reports annually, they can go year over year and see these are our improvements. It's one thing to look at the risk table and see our risk reduction. It's another thing. But when you tell a story, right, this actually unifies that data that you're giving plus a narrative. And so it actually opens it up so the executives can really dig in and see, how their cybersecurity has evolved since you've been helping them. I always like to put in this annual report a risk appetite statement, right? So each business and each client that we work with have a different risk appetite. And so we want to show annually that, hey, we're still aligned, right? So this is the business's risk appetite. This is, kind of the business goals, where they want to be risk adverse or where they want to take more risk. And we want to be able to communicate that, hey, we as the CISO and the security team understand that risk appetite, and we're aligning the program with the business. So this lets us, state here's what we understand the risk appetite is, here's how we try to align with that, and we're communicating that so that that is always at the forethought that we are aligned with the business, that we're not doing what we want just because it's best practice. We're doing it aligned on the customer's needs. This one I would say is optional, but I like to discuss the inherent risk profile, right? This is, as we look at what changes throughout the year, right? In this annual report, an inherent risk, we look at the risk before we put any protections, any controls. These are risks to the business just based on them being where they are doing what they do. And so, the inherent risk profile can shift. So if a business does a merger or acquisition, they open up a new office in a new city, they change their major softwares throughout the year, their inherent risk is going to change year over year. So in this annual report, I like to do a discussion of what is that inherent risk profile? Has it changed? Right? Because as the inherent risk changes, it actually changes how we design a security program. So I like to state that in the annual report. Then I always close the report with an analysis, right? So this analysis is, kind of summarizing the entire report. It's here's the things we're doing good, here's the things we're doing bad, here's the risks that we need to target, here's our outlook for the next year. And so really it's bringing everything together so that the board can go in and say, we're doing all these great things. You don't want to have the question of why do we still need you? We're doing everything great, right? So this also gives you that opportunity to say, here's our strengths, here's our weaknesses, here's where we need to improve, here's the things that we did great, here's where we're going. And so this analysis is summarizing everything in this report, right? So as those industry trends change, as the business changes, as the inherent risk profile changes, we want to summarize that and tell the board, here's what you need to know about that. So that is kind of that annual report. That's how we typically like to close out the year. Typically this could be done in December or January, but you want to make this on an annual cadence. And so all of these three reports come together, right? So you have more of your tactical report on your monthly, right? This is very tactical. It is these are the things we're doing. Here's who's responsible. Here's our goals, our expected outcomes. Then quarterly, we're saying how we're doing, right? How are we doing on the roadmap? Here's our KPIs. Here's how we're measuring things. And then when you go to that end of the year, it's like, man, it's been a big year. Here's how things changed. Here's where we're looking for the next year. So they all work together. So I thank you. Hopefully that helps. And, but I would say tailor your reports to the client's industry, to the executives, and other lessons. We've talked about how different business leaders like to be communicated to differently. Different things stick out to them. Some want numbers, some want dollars, some want, the strategy. So if you include all of those elements into your reports, then they become more effective.